November 2003. Western Pacific Ocean, on the edge of the Mariana Trench. The U.S. Navy Seawolf-class fast-attack nuclear submarine USS Connecticut, SSN-22, was conducting a deep-water surveillance patrol. It was a dual-purpose mission: signals intelligence and ocean environment-assisted acoustic monitoring, codenamed Silent Carmen. At the time, I was a sonar technician aboard the boat, a chief petty officer, call sign Barracuda. I had served 15 years, done under-ice patrols in the Arctic, and tracked Russian Boryai-class submarines. But on the afternoon of November 19, 2003, sitting at Sonar Console 3 in the control room, I heard something that in my judgment should not exist. I still remember the sea state report from that day. Surface winds at 12 knots, waves at 2 meters, subsurface ambient noise at moderate levels, the thermocline stable at 200 meters, near perfect acoustic conditions. Lieutenant Commander Mike Thurman, our commanding officer, said during the briefing that we'd be operating along the western slope of the Mariana Trench at 5 knots, depth 450 meters, conducting 72 hours of passive sonar array monitoring. The objective was any non-cooperative underwater activity, anything. But after that afternoon, the phrase anything took on a very different meaning for me. Before I get into it, I need to say something. I've carried this for nearly 20 years, and only now do I feel able to say it, half-veiled at best. I was told that if I spoke openly about it, I'd be sent for a psychological evaluation. But late at night, when you're alone in a dark room and the wind outside sounds like some low-frequency moan, you start to wonder whether the world we live in is just a thin sheet of ice. Beneath it, an endless, lightless abyss we can't comprehend. And maybe that abyss is watching us too. We tend to think of the ocean as quiet. That's a dangerously wrong assumption. The ocean is full of sound, whale songs, seismic rumbles, the hammering of ship propellers, even the low-frequency pulses of undersea volcanic activity. As a sonar operator, my job was to isolate the sounds that shouldn't be there from that chaos. Our training allowed us to identify thousands of underwater acoustic signatures. Every vessel, every species, every geological process has its own distinct acoustic fingerprint. Like fingerprints, no two are exactly alike. But what I heard that day didn't belong to any known library. Let me start from the beginning. Connecticut departed Opera Harbor, Guam, on November 17th for a routine 2-week patrol. We proceeded southwest along the western edge of the Mariana Trench. The bathymetry in that region is extreme, dropping abruptly from the continental shelf at 300 meters to depths exceeding 11,000 meters inside the trench. The Challenger Deep is the deepest point in Earth's oceans. The pressure there would crush a submarine like a soda can. But we weren't going anywhere near that depth. We stayed along the upper edge, like a bat flying along a cliff face. The first 48 hours were uneventful. Standard submerged patrol procedures, rotating watch every 6 hours. My sonar station had 3 displays: low-frequency broadband spectrum, mid-frequency narrowband analysis, and a 3D acoustic imaging interface. We also had an independent towed passive array connected by a multi-kilometer fiber optic cable trailing behind the sub, offering far greater sensitivity than the bow array. November 19th, 14:23 local time. I was eating lunch. Reheated chicken and rice in a foil pouch tasted like chewing cardboard when Lieutenant McDonald, the watch officer, called me back to sonar immediately. His voice was calm, but I'd known him 8 years. I could hear what was underneath it. Alertness. Something instinctive. Something old. I set down my fork and went into the sonar room. It was a cramped compartment aft of the control room, always kept at 18 degrees Celsius, the air faintly smelling of ozone from the equipment. I took my seat at console 3 and put on the headset. McDonald stood behind me. Passive array 3. Low band, 13 to 27 hertz. Just listen. I switched inputs and boosted the low-frequency gain. Then I heard it. A low-frequency, pulsing sound, about once every 4 to 5 seconds. The frequency was so low, it was almost below human hearing. You felt it more than heard it, like something resonating deep in your chest. I shifted the frequency upward into a more audible range. What I heard then, if I had to describe it, sounded like something enormous and wet slowly contracting and expanding, like a heartbeat. A heartbeat so large it was beyond comprehension. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. What unsettled me most was that the waveform didn't match any known bioacoustic model. Whale heart rates are far lower than this. And at 450 meters, no animal would produce such a clear cardiac signal. Any organism at that depth would require an extremely efficient circulatory system, meaning a faster heartbeat, not slower. The rhythm felt deliberate, mechanical almost, but not truly mechanical. Machines are precise, perfectly periodic. This wasn't. Each pulse varied slightly from the last, stronger, weaker, like breathing. "What do you hear?" McDonald asked. "Unknown contact. Bearing 270. Relative depth unknown," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "We've been tracking it for about 11 minutes, he said. "It's closing. About 3 knots. 3 knots. At 450 meters, along the slope of the Mariana Trench, something moving toward us at 3 knots. That's not a passive drift. That's controlled movement. I pulled the last 15 minutes of recorded data and began spectral analysis. Extracted the acoustic signature and ran it against the database. Everything the Navy had collected since World War II. Soviet nuclear subs, Chinese diesel boats, whales, earthquakes, ice fractures, hydrothermal vents. The system took about 4 seconds. No match. I reported that to McDonald. He was silent for a moment, then said, "Keep tracking. I'm informing the captain." The next 40 minutes were the longest of my career. The contact continued to approach, accelerating from 3 knots to 7. Its depth shifted from unknown to an estimated range between 480 and 520 meters, based on triangulation. That put it below us. The trench there runs deeper than 8,000 meters. 500 meters is just the upper slope. But what really started to bother me wasn't just its presence. It was the other sounds it began to make. At approximately 15:07, I noticed something between the heartbeat pulses, a high-frequency, rapid clicking, similar to echolocation used by dolphins or sperm whales, but far outside any known range. Dolphins typically operate between 40 and 130 kHz. Sperm whales 10 to 30 kHz. This signal ranged from 2 kHz up past 200 kHz, beyond the precise analytical limits of my equipment. More disturbing, the clicks weren't random. They formed a complex temporal pattern. I recorded it and fed it into the onboard signal analysis computer. It processed for nearly 2 minutes, then returned a result that made my spine go cold. The pattern exhibited mathematical fractal characteristics. Fractals. That meant it wasn't random, and not simply periodic. It contained self-similar structure across scales. Fractals do exist in nature. Snowflakes, coastlines, fern leaves, but it's exceedingly rare for biological acoustic signals to display that property. Among known marine life, none do. At the time, I didn't realize that signal was only the beginning. What followed would fundamentally shake my understanding of reality. I need to pause here to say something about the boundary between reality and illusion. During my years in the Navy, I came to understand something. What we call reality is just a subset of signals we're capable of processing. Human senses have bandwidth limits. We see only a narrow band of the electromagnetic spectrum, hear only a limited frequency range, feel only certain levels of stimulus. Anything outside that bandwidth doesn't exist to our perception. But not existing to us doesn't mean it isn't there. The essence of sonar operator's job is to convert the inaudible into the audible. We take sounds that fall outside the range of human hearing, both low and high frequencies, and shift them into a range the human ear can perceive. In other words, we're creating a kind of illusion. What we hear is not the sound in its original form, but a translated version our minds can process. That fact alone is unsettling, because it means we can never truly know what the original actually is. We are always perceiving the world through layers of filters. And the most disturbing part is that we don't even know whether those filters themselves are distorted. On the afternoon of November 19th, 2003, I began to suspect that something deep within the Mariana Trench was producing signals far beyond the range our filters could accurately process. Our equipment was trying to translate it into something we could understand, but maybe in doing so, it was losing something critical. Maybe what we heard as a heartbeat wasn't a heartbeat at all. Maybe we thought we were tracking a biological entity, when in reality, we were chasing an artifact generated by our own instruments, like someone running through a hall of mirrors, chasing their own reflection. At the time, though, those thoughts were just vague intuition. I was a rigorously trained Navy sonar technician. My job was to report data, not indulge in philosophy. So I compiled all my analysis into a formal SITREP situation report and transmitted it to the control room through the ship's internal comms. At 15:22, Lieutenant Commander Thurman entered the sonar room. He was a big man, 6'3", over 200 pounds, balding, with a ring of gray stubble and eyes sharp enough to cut steel. He stood behind me, arms crossed, listening in silence to the pulsing sound for several minutes. Then he asked a question I'll never forget. "Barracuda, what do you think it is?" I didn't answer right away. In the Navy, when a commanding officer asks what you think rather than what the data shows, it means he's no longer satisfied with facts alone. He wants your instinct. And instinct in this field is the sum of experience, the pattern recognition built from everything you've heard over 15 years. "Sir," I said, "it's not a submarine, not any known submarine, not a decoy or false target either. The acoustic signature doesn't match any mechanical system." "Biological?" Thurman asked. "If it is," I said, "it would have to be the largest known organism. A blue whale's heart weighs around 1,800 pounds, with a resting rate of 4 to 8 beats per minute. What we're hearing translates to roughly 12 to 15 beats per minute. But there's no way a blue whale's heartbeat would be picked up this clearly at 450 meters from over 10 nautical miles away. The signal strength, sir, is far beyond any reasonable biological source." Thurman was quiet for a few seconds. "What else?" I hesitated. This was a critical moment. As a sonar tech, I had one iron rule: never report what you're not certain of. One sentence from you could put the entire submarine in a combat posture, could trigger decisions that can't be undone. But I also knew that if I held back and this thing turned out to be a threat, the responsibility would fall squarely on me. "Sir," I said, "it's echolocation signal. I analyzed the temporal pattern. It exhibits fractal structure." "Explain." "A fractal structure means the signal isn't simple reflection or mechanical noise. It contains a complex, mathematically self-similar pattern over time. This exists in nature, but it's never been observed in biological echolocation. Sir, I believe this source is intelligent. It's actively probing its surroundings. It's using sonar, its own sonar, to scan this area." Thurman didn't respond immediately. He stood there, staring at the slow, undulating trace on the sonar display. The lighting in the room was dim red to preserve night vision. In that light, his face looked almost rusted over. "Notify Combat Information Center," he finally said. "Set Condition 2 readiness. Maintain passive monitoring. Do not transmit any active sonar pings. I don't want it knowing we're tracking it." That was standard protocol. Unknown underwater contact, especially in deep water. Rules of engagement were clear. Remain passive until intent is determined. Active sonar in the deep ocean is like shouting in a dark room. You reveal exactly where you are without knowing what might answer back. For the next 2 hours, the contact kept closing. Its speed behaved strangely, not constant, but cycling through acceleration and deceleration. At times it surged forward at 7 to 8 knots, then dropped suddenly to 2 or 3, as if it were doing something. Its depth gradually changed as well, rising from around 500 meters to about 400, almost level with us. By 1700 hours, it was within roughly 8 nautical miles. By then, the atmosphere in the control room had grown tense. The officer of the deck kept updating target motion parameters. Navigation was recalculating evasive routes. The torpedo officer had already prepared firing solutions. But the most strained were the people in the sonar room, because we were the only ones who could truly hear it. And hearing it is not the same as just knowing it's there. What I heard can't be fully described in words. It was a composite of multiple layers of sound. In a low-frequency band, the heartbeat pulse, now clearer than ever. I could hear subtle, fluid movement between beats, like something circulating through a massive system. In a mid-frequency band, the fractal echolocation clicks had grown denser, the intervals tightening, as if responding to something, maybe even the faint noise our own submarine was emitting. In the high-frequency band, shifted down into audibility, there was a continuous background hiss like static, but with a strange underlying rhythm. I combined the signals and listened through my headset for several minutes. Then I did something that violated protocol. I routed the audio into the control room's internal broadcast, but only to a handful of senior personnel. I didn't want panic, but I believed they needed to hear what we were dealing with. I heard Master Chief Thompson, a 22-year veteran, 3 combat patrols, mutter under his breath after listening, "My God." Thompson never said "my God." He was a committed atheist, once openly mocking another officer's religion during a briefing. But that night, there was no mockery in his voice, only something close to fear. At 17:34, everything changed. The contact went silent. The heartbeat stopped. The echolocation click stopped. The background hiss vanished. The sonar display showed nothing but ambient ocean noise, the constant, harmless, familiar sounds of the sea. It was as if the thing had never existed. The control room fell completely silent. Everyone stared at the display, waiting for the signal to return. 1 minute passed. 2, 5, 10. Did it leave? McDonald asked quietly. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe." Or maybe it just went quiet. I pulled up the historical data, searching for any clue. That's when I noticed something. In the final seconds before it disappeared, its echolocation signal had changed dramatically. It shifted from a broad-spectrum scanning mode to a narrow, highly focused frequency, 28.3 kilohertz. I stared at that number for a few seconds, and a cold chill crawled up my spine. 28.3 kilohertz, that's one of the standard operating frequencies of Connecticut's active sonar system. Specifically, the center frequency of the END/BQS, 13 spherical array. Right before it vanished, that thing had locked onto our sonar frequency. That meant one of two things. Either it had somehow detected faint electromagnetic leakage from our passive array, which is extremely unlikely since passive systems emit virtually nothing, or it had been listening to our submarine's own mechanical noise and reverse engineering our sonar characteristics from it. The second possibility terrified me, because it meant that whatever this was, it didn't just possess acoustic detection capabilities far beyond any known organism. It had analytical capability. It was analyzing us, identifying our systems, parsing our signature the way a sonar technician would. And then it disappeared. At 17:45, Commander Thurman ordered readiness downgraded to Condition 3. But no one truly relaxed. The sonar room remained at maximum sensitivity, monitoring every sound in the surrounding water. For the next 4 hours, I sat at Console 3, eyes locked on the display, listening to every faint signal. There was nothing. Whatever it was gone. Around 2,300 hours, I decided to get some sleep. After more than 8 hours of continuous monitoring of a high-intensity, unknown signal, my judgment was starting to degrade. I needed rest. I handed off monitoring to the operator at Console 1, a corporal named Martinez, and went back to my rack. I dreamed. In the dream, I was standing on an endless expanse of black water. The surface was perfectly still, like a massive black mirror. The sky above was also black. No stars, no moon, no light source of any kind. And yet, somehow, I could see everything. I could see my hands, the water beneath my feet, and far in the distance, something casting a massive shadow across the surface. The shadow was moving, slowly, silently, toward me. I tried to run, but my feet were fixed to the water by some unseen force. I tried to shout, but no sound came out. The shadow drew closer, and I could begin to make out its outline. Enormous, streamlined, not quite matching the shape of any known organism. And just as it reached me, I heard the sound. Not the heartbeat, not the echolocation. A low, almost imperceptible hum, like some vast engine running. But it wasn't an engine. It was breathing. It was breathing with its entire body. I woke up. The air in the rack felt stale. The ventilation ducted humming steadily. I checked my watch, 2:11. I'd slept for about 3 hours. I lay there staring at the metal panel above me, trying to calm myself down. It was just a dream, I told myself. Just my subconscious processing the anomalous data from earlier. Everyone has nightmares after prolonged stress. It doesn't mean anything. But I went back to the sonar room anyway. 2:23. I walked in and saw Corporal Martinez sitting at Console 3, his face pale. When he saw me, he pulled off his headset and stood up. "Chief," he said, "it's back." I took my seat, put on the headset. The sound had returned. The heartbeat pulses. The echolocation clicks. The background hiss. Everything was there. But one thing had changed. Its position. Before it disappeared, it had been to our southwest, about 8 nautical miles out. Now it was directly beneath us. The depth reading showed the source at approximately 200 meters below sea level. It had gone from 500 meters to over 5,000 in less than 8 hours. And during that descent, it had emitted no detectable acoustic signal until it reached that depth and resumed activity. A signal at 200 meters. Let me explain what that means. In the Mariana Trench, at that depth, hydrostatic pressure exceeds 500 atmospheres, over half a ton of force per square centimeter. At those pressures, the properties of most materials change, and the speed of sound shifts with pressure and temperature. Our sonar systems are not designed to reliably detect signals from below 5,000 meters, because as sound travels from deep to shallow water, it undergoes extreme refraction and scattering. And yet we were receiving this signal clearly as if it were in the next compartment, which meant one thing: anomalous didn't even begin to describe its intensity. It was overwhelming. Whatever was generating, it was transmitting through 5,000 meters of seawater, through thermoclines, sound layers, every oceanographic barrier, with almost no loss of strength. That's nearly impossible in conventional physics. Unless the source wasn't just emitting sound, unless it was using the entire water column itself as a resonant medium in a way we don't understand. I pulled up the signal analysis. Then I saw a number that made my hands tremble. 16,025 hertz. 16,025 hertz. Does that number mean anything? It does. That's roughly AC -1, 2 octaves below the lowest C on a piano. The wavelength at that frequency is about 95 meters. 95 meters. That means the physical structure generating that sound, if it's acting as a resonant cavity, would be proportional to that wavelength. In simple terms, the source would have to be at least a fraction to multiple times that size, depending on resonance mode. For something like a hemispherical resonator, that suggests a diameter on the order of 20 to 50 meters. 20 to 50 meters. That's the minimum size, if it's a physical resonator at all. But the data showed something else. The 16,025 hertz signal wasn't pure. It contained extremely fine harmonic structures extending into the hundreds of hertz. That kind of harmonic complexity indicates not a simple vibrating membrane or cavity, but a highly complex, multi-component acoustic system, like an array of different-sized oscillating elements, all precisely coordinated. If you understand acoustics, you know what that implies. This wasn't a passive source, not a giant heart, not a lung. It was active, structured, functional. It was doing something. The question was, what? At 3 o'clock, I made a decision. That decision later got me sent to a Navy Psychological Evaluation Center for 6 months, nearly cost me my rank and my pension. But at the time, I believe it was the right call. I activated the onboard recording systems and copied all sonar data, raw feeds, process analysis, spectrograms, time series, onto an independent encrypted hard drive. Then, without authorization, I physically disconnected that drive and hid it in a false panel inside my personal locker. Why? Because in that moment, I realized something. Whatever this was, it would never survive in any official report. Not because it was classified, though it certainly was, but because it was too strange, too far outside our understanding of the world. If I reported it exactly as observed, it would be labeled instrument malfunction or operator error and buried in some dusty Pentagon archive. Or worse, I'd be labeled unstable and lose everything I'd spent 15 years building. So I kept a copy, not to leak, not to sell, just so that someday, if I ever had the courage to talk about it, I'd have proof that I wasn't losing my mind. At the time, though, I simply hid the drive and returned to work. At 3:45, we received a message from Combat Information Center. One line: command requests SITREP update. Priority: intent assessment. Intent assessment. I almost laughed. We didn't even know what the thing was. How are we supposed to assess its intent? Was it biological or mechanical? Natural or artificial? Part of Earth's biosphere, or something else entirely. We knew nothing, only that it emitted sound, moved, and perceived its surroundings in ways we didn't fully understand. As for intent, it might have been doing whatever it always does, the way whales sing. It might not even have a concept of intent, but I couldn't write that. So I sat down and drafted a 3-page sitrep in the most professional language I could manage. I described the acoustic properties, movement patterns, depth changes, signal, structure. I noted the fractal characteristics and the 16.025 Hz fundamental frequency. I documented its descent to 5,000 meters and its anomalous signal strength. I mentioned that it had identified our active sonar frequency. And in the intent assessment section, I wrote, unable to determine. Recommend continued passive monitoring. Avoid any actions that may be perceived as provocative. I sent the report. Then I went back to listening. The next 12 hours were the calmest and most unsettling of my career. The contact remained active at 5,000 meters, but it no longer approached us. It seemed to have found something deep within the trench. Its signal pattern changed. The scanning behavior stopped. The heartbeat pulses ceased. Instead, it emitted a continuous, steady low-frequency hum, like a massive machine in operation. The intensity was perfectly stable. The frequency was exact to a degree that made me briefly suspect internal equipment resonance, but all systems checked out normal. Then, at 15:22 on the 19th, exactly 24 hours after we first detected it, something happened that I still cannot explain. I was at the console, recording parameters of that continuous hum, and suddenly, it stopped. Not fading, not diminishing. Instantly, like someone flipped a switch. Every trace of the signal vanished from the display, just like before. But this time, 3 seconds after it disappeared, our entire sonar array registered signal, not from one direction, from all directions. Above, below, port, starboard, fore, aft, simultaneously. The waveform was simple. A single, sharp pulse, less than 1/10 of a second in duration. But its intensity was so extreme that our automatic gain control immediately attenuated the entire receiving chain by 40 decibels to prevent system overload. I pulled off my headset. The pulse was so strong that even with gain control, it sent a sharp pain through my ears. The others in the sonar room reacted the same way. Martinez actually jumped out of his seat, clutching his ears. "What was that?" he shouted. I didn't know. I put the headset back on, but every channel was silent. Completely silent. Not normal ocean background noise. True, absolute silence. As if every sound around us, whale songs, ship noise, seismic rumbles, even the movement of the water itself, had been erased by that pulse. The silence lasted about 15 seconds. Then everything came back. The ocean sounds returned. The background noise resumed. Everything went back to normal, as if nothing had happened. But the contact never came back. Connecticut continued its patrol in the Mariana Trench for another 3 days before returning to Guam as scheduled. During those 3 days, we monitored continuously, but the signal never reappeared. We submitted a final sitrep to command, documenting the entire Ghatna in detail. The report was classified. I still remember the archive number, but I won't write it here. After returning to Guam, I was called in for a post-mission debrief. It was led by a civilian contractor from Submarine Forces Pacific Command, with 2 naval intelligence officers and a psychologist present. They asked me a lot of questions about equipment calibration, my sleep during the mission, whether I had taken any medication, my personal life, any history of mental illness. They asked everything, except one thing. What was the contact? That's when I understood. This wasn't a technical investigation. It was a reliability assessment. They weren't trying to figure out what the signal was. They were trying to determine whether I was mentally fit to continue serving. They didn't care what it was. They cared whether I was crazy. So I told them what they wanted to hear. I said I might have made an error in analysis. That thermocline distortion could have caused misinterpretation. That it might have been equipment malfunction. That multiple factors could have created an anomaly. They let me go. After that, I was required to undergo regular psychological evaluations for 6 months. Eventually, I was cleared for continued service. But I was never again assigned to missions near the Mariana Trench. My career continued for another 7 years. I retired as a chief petty officer. 22 years of service. 3 commendations. 1 Navy Achievement Medal. A respectable record. But I never forgot that sound. In the years since retiring, I've done my own research. I've read every publicly available report on deep-sea acoustic anomalies. I've contacted other retired submariners, asking, carefully, whether they'd experienced anything similar. I found a few cases. In 1977, the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration recorded an extremely unusual sound in the Pacific, later called the bloop. It was low frequency, extremely powerful, and propagated over vast distances, unlike any known geological or biological source. The official explanation was an ice quake, Antarctic ice breaking apart. But there's a problem. The source was triangulated in the southeastern Pacific, near the west coast of South America, thousands of kilometers from Antarctica. And the signal had a distinct characteristic. Its frequency smoothly decreased over time, like a resonant cavity increasing in size. That pattern bears an unsettling resemblance to what I heard in the Mariana Trench. In 1992, a U.S. Navy nuclear submarine operating in the North Atlantic detected an unknown contact at 6,000 meters. According to a retired officer I spoke with, its movement pattern was similar to what we encountered, appearing suddenly, executing impossible maneuvers, then vanishing without a trace. Afterward, their captain gathered senior personnel and told them, this never happened. He warned that any disclosure would be prosecuted as a breach of national security. In 1997, another anomalous sound, known as Julia, was recorded. It lasted about 15 seconds, with an unusually pure frequency and high intensity. Again, the official explanation pointed to ice activity. I gathered all available data from these cases and compared them to what I had saved on that hard drive. Different locations, different times, different recording systems. But the core acoustic characteristics were disturbingly consistent. Frequencies clustered between 10 and 30 hertz. Signal strengths far exceeding known biological sources. Non-random, structured temporal patterns. And in every case, sudden disappearance. As if they had never been there at all. All of it points toward conclusion. One I still struggle to accept. In the deepest parts of the ocean, where sunlight never reaches, where pressure can crush steel, something exists. It is not any known organism. Not any known geological phenomenon. Not any known human-made system. It is something unknown, vast, intentional, or at least functional. It might be a life form, something adapted to extreme deep-sea conditions that we've never discovered. It might be part of an ecosystem we've completely overlooked, something at the very bottom or the very top of a hidden food chain. It might be older, something that predates life as we know it, a remnant from an earlier era of this planet. Or it might be something we cannot comprehend at all. Its purpose, its awareness, even its form of existence beyond human understanding. I don't know, but I keep coming back to one question. At 15:22 on November 19th, 2003, when that massive pulse arrived from all directions at once, when the entire ocean fell into absolute silence for 15 seconds, what did it do? Was it communicating, warning us, or simply carrying out some routine behavior beyond our understanding? Like a whale surfacing to breathe? Did that pulse erase all other sound because it overwhelmed everything? Or did it somehow shut the ocean off? If it was the latter, how? What kind of energy would that require? What kind of precision? What kind of understanding of acoustic physics? I often think back to that dream, standing on that black water, the massive shadow approaching. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. It stopped in front of me, observed me in a way I couldn't perceive, then moved on, descending into deeper darkness, leaving me alone on that silent surface. Maybe that's the nature of our relationship with it. It knows we're here. It has seen us, but doesn't consider us worth responding to. The way we don't stop to speak to an ant on a roadside. It moves through its own world, following its own rules, fulfilling its own purpose. And we, human civilization, are nothing more than a faint, insignificant source of noise it passes by. If that's true, then our arrogance is almost comical. We spend billions searching the stars for extraterrestrial life. We send signals into deep space, hoping for a reply. But maybe the reply has been here all along, not light years away, right beneath us. in the darkness below our ships, in a place sunlight has never touched. It has been making sound this whole time. We just haven't learned how to listen. That's my story. I've kept that hard drive for nearly 20 years. It's sitting in a safe deposit box now, alongside my retirement papers. I don't know what I'll ultimately do with it. Maybe one day, I'll hand it over to a research institution. Maybe I'll destroy it. Maybe I'll leave it to my grandson and tell him that before he was born, his grandfather heard something in the deep ocean that couldn't be explained. But before that, I want to ask you something. Something I ask myself every night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling in the dark. When you look up at the stars and marvel at the vastness of the universe and at how small we are, have you ever thought that maybe we should be looking down instead? Maybe the real unknown isn't out there, billions of light years away. Maybe it's 11 kilometers beneath our feet, in that endless darkness. In that abyss we've explored less than 0.5% of. Maybe something down there is looking back at us. Maybe it always has, since the beginning of this planet. Watching trilobites crawl through shallow seas. Watching dinosaurs roam the land. Watching humans climb down from the trees, build cities, launch rockets, and destroy one another. Watching everything, never leaving, never intervening. Just there, in the dark, waiting. Or maybe it doesn't care at all. The way we don't care about the ants beneath our feet. It has its own life, its own history, its own purpose. We don't even register. I don't know which is more frightening, that it's watching us, or that it isn't. But there is one thing I am certain of. That sound was real. Those 16 hours of monitoring were real. The data on that hard drive is real. I was not losing my mind. My equipment did not fail. Something was there in the darkness of the Mariana Trench that day. It exists on this planet alongside us. And its existence means that everything we think we understand about the world, every map, every model, every rule, is just a thin surface layer. Beneath it lies an infinite unknown. And for a brief moment, I caught a glimpse of it. That's enough.